Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, I'm going to talk about the power of empathy and as it relates to sex, And so I didn't figure out the title yet, so that's why that sounded a little awkward because, I just say these things and every so often I record it before I get to my computer to make the title. But I'll tell you it's going to have to do with empathy and sex. So, you're watching or listening to, as usual, the real-time confluence of my thoughts, into podcast form. And the reason that I thought about doing this is because I got a dick pic sent to my chat for scheduling for Best Life Behavioral Health. So, certainly not a banner moment. Thankfully, my husband checks that stuff, not me. So he's the one who told me about it. And of course, I've gotten my share being a woman on the internet, and it's disgusting. You should never do it. It's terrible. But it is understandable for a man who has zero empathy. And also, there was some awesome comment, very useful, helpful comment that a man made on my stuff about why young guys are so bad in bed, and that also has to do with a lack of empathy. So the role of empathy in becoming a better sexual partner. That's going to be the title if I remember. It'll be something like that. So before I get to it, please do subscribe. I have so many extra hours and hours of listening if you're a subscriber. And let's see, what was the most recent few? I won't even just do one. I had, the world is hard enough. Home should be a safe haven for kids. No, stop. So that is not a thing that is actually good to say. You'll figure out why when you listen. Don't have non-orgasmic sex too often. Which women are okay with their husband having long work hours and which women aren't. And physiological variables that impact how irritable your partner is, including sex. So that's just the most recent that are on the page that I just looked at right now. The most recent subscriber episodes, and there's loads and loads more. But let's get back to the topic at hand. So why would a guy send a dick pic? So some women, I posted about it on social media. I said, most people think we ought to have more mental health providers. The guys who send dick pics to therapists, are going to make all the ones we have quit, And certainly it's a huge downside of being a female practitioner. People also call the scheduling line and jerk off. It is so disgusting. It's enough to make you want to be a nun. But my job is to empathize with people. So almost automatically, I think about, well, why would somebody do something like this? A lot of women think that it's a power play. The guy, it's like basically a rape. It's the guy wants to assault you and he wants to upset you, and that's why he does it. But I've talked to enough guys who are ex-porn addicts to know that this is not true for a lot of guys. Most guys are not sociopaths, What happens is, and these all come through late night too, most of them, they don't come through at 1 p.m. And so what happens is the guy's in the middle of a porn binge, and it's like real time, example of what happens when you're hooked on porn. Like that drug commercial, this is your brain on pod or whatever. Well, your brain on porn thinks that whoever gets your dick pic is going to be turned on because it's like a porn. It's like you feel that if you got a picture of a vagina, you would be very happy, and you can't imagine that it wouldn't be the same. It's a complete lack of empathy. It's not understanding at all that this would be taken as an aggressive act, an upsetting act, a disturbing and disgusting act, that she wants nothing less than to see your penis in the whole world right then, and instead it's thought, man, seeing a random vagina would really make my day. In fact, that's what I've been doing for the last 3.5 hours, is looking at random vaginas, and I am feeling no pain. So this is awesome. And I'm going to share the love, because if it was me, and then things start to get really porny, it's like if I was manning the chat late night, as a psychologist that talks about sex on the internet, I bet I'd be getting kind of horny, It turns into this whole ridiculous porn-esque scene in the guy's head where he actually thinks she would want to see it. He actually does, And for guys that do this and who treat women like objects, when I have them in therapy, we do a lot of work on saying kind of like, would your mom want to see a random dick? Oh, no, of course not. Your sister? No, I don't think so. What about your daughter? How would you feel if your 16-year-old daughter was sent a random dick, They're like, that's disgusting. I'd kill that guy. Well, shit, It takes a lot of empathy and really direct work on envisioning what somebody else is feeling to build empathy. That's why literary fiction, research shows that if you read enough literary fiction, which is good books, not like books that have very little character development, but books that really do develop a character that you could really empathize with them, they actually help with building empathy. And I thought that's one of my favorite studies, because I love literary fiction, as do all probably highly sensitive psychologists, I would imagine. But point being that the guy is so hyped up on porn and he would like to see a vagina. So it's like he cannot imagine that it would not make somebody's day, even if they don't admit it, because, yes, no means yes. And in this, because they're all fucked up. They're all ramped up on porn, on coke, and they're like, oh yeah, even if women deny it, how could they not get turned on by seeing, an erection? Because for me, shit, it's a no-brainer. It's against my will. If I were to see a vagina, it's just immediate arousal. So, women can't be that different. I've had this porn tab open on my browser for a hell of a long time, and all the women on there seem to really like penises, It would make any one of those women's day to see a penis, I'm sure. Definitely not just a job for money. They love sex, et cetera, et cetera. And how does this relate to the comment that I promised you would tie it? So a guy made a very insightful comment. I think I may even have mentioned it before in a different podcast because I thought it was so interesting and on target. He said, when men are young, they are enjoying sex so much. Just the act of intercourse, just penetrating a woman is so novel and so interesting. They themselves are having so much fun that they cannot imagine that she's not. She's there. They're both doing the same thing, like the complementary versions of the same activity. So it's like they cannot imagine that she's not having fun. It's like a little kid covering his eyes and saying, you don't see me. He can't see you, so therefore he thinks you can't see him. It's a deficit in theory of mind. And little did this guy know from saying this, it is actually true that there is a stage called adolescent narcissism. So at the adolescent age is when even empathic adolescents are not very empathic, they are the center of their own world, and that's developmentally appropriate. But it would be the prime time for a young boy, a young guy, a 16-year-old guy losing his virginity to not have any idea how the woman feels. And she thinks, of course, that, since it's so bad, almost they both know it's bad. So it's the exact opposite. Because it's so bad for her, she thinks that, having an orgasm is just, he has an orgasm, she doesn't. She understands that much. But how could it really be something he wants to keep doing? It sucks, it's terrible. And so the beginnings of the empathic rupture in that couple, if they are to continue being together, are sown. The seeds are sown for an empathic rupture. She, if they were to stay together, 20 years later in couples counseling would say, how could you not have known that it was terrible, our sex life, all these years? And he says, what do you mean? It was wonderful, because he thinks that it was, from his perspective. So how can you mobilize these insights from my commenter and about the dick pic fiasco? How can you mobilize that so that you can become better in bed? Well, the number one thing that makes somebody good in bed is empathy. It's being able to envision the other person's experience from their perspective. And this is what women are lacking when they don't understand why the man wants sex at all, or wants oral sex, or wants novel sex, or wants kinky sex, or whatever. They cannot imagine that somebody feels differently than they do, which is somewhat, bored and irritated by the whole operation. And that's a huge deficit in empathy, and I reiterate that over and over and over. But then what about on the other side? it's not just to be able to understand a woman is different than you, and therefore she has a clitoris, and, you got to touch it or whatever. Because a lot of guys can get that, especially once they realize it's like a penis, because they're like, oh my God, I was making the wrong analogy. I thought the vagina was like the penis, and it turns out it's the clitoris. Shit, I got to adjust my whole algorithm. And then they will. If you learn, most people want to learn, and so then they learn. But then once they get there, they still have a hard time with things like responsive desire until they get older. Then they're like, oh shit, so she needs to touch me for me to get hard. And that's how it is for her. Holy Christ, right? And so then they're all excited with that one. And, and believe me, there's some guys who are very intelligent and they're very good in bed. They're very emotionally intelligent, which is basically the same thing as saying good in bed. And so they're great with this. But the ones who are not emotionally intelligent need a lot of concrete examples and metaphors and all of the things that I'm trying to do right now. So if a man is emotionally intelligent and empathic, by the way, you get like that from being raised in a home where feelings are discussed. I even have a post saying, moms, help your son with women by telling him about your feelings. Not in a crazy trauma dumping way, but basically telling him you are a human being. Sometimes you are happy. Sometimes you are sad. Not saying your father's a real piece of shit. Not that stuff, but if you are around women who you perceive to have emotions, and then you can understand that women are people, they're different than you, then that, and sometimes very similar and sometimes different, then that man is like way ahead of the game with women. And I mean, I should have got a lot more eyes on that post by saying, women, make your son good in bed by telling him about your feelings. But that's a little fucking weird. So, but it's the truth. It's the truth. Men who can understand women are going to be good in bed. Because if you can understand, for example, that she's touched out after a long day with the kids, and that isn't something that takes like 7 Excel spreadsheets to explain to you, then you're also going to be the guy who understands, oh, she doesn't want to be touched right away. Oh, she needs foreplay. Oh, she likes the mental component of sex. Oh, she likes romance. All of that stuff, it's like, oh, it's not like me, but I can understand and empathize with it. She's very different because I'm used to doing that in general. So now I'm doing it in the sexual domain. And the men who are best in bed obviously can understand what it's like to be inside the woman's body as much as they can, not any sci-fi shit, right? But like they can really kind of merge and bond with the woman in the moment that she's experiencing pleasure and see exactly what he's doing that's bringing her pleasure, and he can adjust. It's like dancing, how some people are very good at dancing. And obviously women that are good in bed are very similar. They have a lot of empathy. They can assess if what they're doing is getting a good reaction. And if not, they can figure out something else to do. People who are good at conversation and who are good at dancing are also usually good at sex. That's why both of those things are flirting. Banter and dancing are both flirting because they're basically showing, hey, I'm going to be good at sex. I understand exactly how to make you laugh. I understand how to twirl you. I understand how to lead you in a conversation or in dancing or in bed, right? So those sorts of things, people who are better with people, who are better with emotions, who are better with empathy are always better in bed. So you got to work on your empathy. I mean, this is unintentionally probably the best ad for therapy that I've ever done, is because that's what we work on in therapy, is empathy. We work on how can you understand other people in this moment, what you are describing to me of this interaction. How else could you interpret it? Maybe the other person didn't mean that they hate you. Maybe they mean XYZ. Maybe they're on their own mountain there, doing their own life, their own journey, and it had nothing to do with you. How could you practice responding differently in XYZ social interaction, even with a coworker, right? To practice the skills that we're learning at perspective taking and maybe test some of your assumptions, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of work on empathy done in therapy. And all of that makes people better at being a partner and better in bed and better at contingently responding and being aware of what brings the other person pleasure versus pain versus boredom versus, existential despair, etc. And so So what is the opposite of this, by the way? What's like an empathy destroyer cross gender? Porn. Porn is like any empathy you've developed, you gotta remove it if you watch porn. Because in porn, anything the man does that's something that a man would like, somehow the woman likes it too. You know, it's like, you know what it's like, a good example. So many men are like, God, my wife, she just does whatever the kids want. She lets them run all over her. You know, and I even have a podcast about this, how not to be a dick about this and reframe it. But the reality is a woman, a mother, or a father, I see both, who allow the children to run all over them and pretend that they have no feelings. They never get bored. They never get hurt. They literally, the kid could hit them and they're just like, ow, and they just keep going without even like responding in anything like a normal way, which by the way would be, that really hurt me. We don't do that. Why did you hurt me, right? But whatever, we can do that in another podcast. Point being is that parents who act like they have no emotions and just live to serve are not teaching the kid empathy. And every man understands that automatically. They're like, oh yeah, they run all over my wife. They are not learning to be nice to her at all. They're turning into little fucking assholes, right? And they'll say that outright. And it's true. It's 100% true. I have a whole podcast about it. Stop letting your kids treat you like garbage. And one of the big reasons, besides that you don't deserve to be treated like garbage, despite how you grew up and what you think, which is summarized in that podcast, is that the kids are going to learn to be assholes because that's who treats people like garbage. So if you let them treat you like garbage, they're going to treat other people like garbage because they're not developing empathy. So same thing, right? So if the men in porn treat women like garbage, like truly, they're not providing an experience that women enjoy, you know, despite that, of course, the women in porn are acting like that mother with the children. She's acting like anything they do, like, you know, your kid, if you're in this situation, your kid could draw like 3 lines on a piece of paper and your wife is like, oh my God, buddy, that is so great. Look at little Picasso. OMG, let's put it on the fridge. And you're like, he's fucking 11 years old. You are rewarding him for like the nothing, not even the bare minimum, something that he could have drawn with his foot, you know? And you're like, Jesus, she's going to make him into such a narcissistic asshole. But meanwhile, that's what porn is. Like the guy brings out his penis and the woman does the equivalent of, oh my God, buddy, I am so happy. I'm going to have an orgasm right now. And it has nothing to do with how a real life woman would respond. So it's like the opposite. I mean, this is not probably something I came up with, but porn is the opposite of literary fiction in that it promotes less empathy instead of more. So the people that are sending the dick pics and the people that are having sex with their wife just with penetration and don't remember that she has a body and a mind, they're like the same people. Or the guys who grab their wife's boobs because it would make their day if the woman grabbed their penis. But meanwhile, I keep saying, and the woman keeps saying, that will hurt a woman when she is not aroused. A boob is not like a penis. But he's like, no, you don't understand. It's like a penis. You know, you see, it's like a penis. It's something that hangs. It's I love it. I love when she does that. So basically, that guy's having no empathy. The dick pic guy has no empathy. If you're bad in bed, you have no empathy. So you got to work on your empathy. And yes, you can't get blood from a stone if your wife is asexual or she doesn't want sex with you at all. Yeah, you can't practice, but perhaps you could practice kissing or massaging. That requires empathy because you have to do it good. You actually have to do it, you know, like you can't just be like with the 2 fingers, like that claw that people buy to get things from the top shelf. That cannot be how you massage your wife, you know, because otherwise, of course, some guys are like, no, she doesn't like massage. And all the time I think, how are you massaging her that she, quote, doesn't like massage? Sometimes I'll be, the best one is when they're like, no, she only likes to go to get a professional massage. I'm like, so basically what you're saying is like, you can't massage her and you don't learn and she doesn't tell you. And she is a person who likes massage and in fact pays for massage, but you can't do it. So massage requires empathy. Dancing requires empathy. All of anything that is arousing requires empathy because you actually have to feel what the other person's feeling. And if you are watching a lot of porn or you are, as a woman, if you are watching constantly romantic movies, in those, the woman could be a huge bitch. She's like a huge nasty bitch. And then this wonderful man is like, I see right through that. I think all you need is a little extra love. And that is never, ever going to happen. In real life, when you act like a big bitch, you get the dregs. You get the guys that nobody else wants to marry. Because healthy guys, like the one that would be the protagonist in the rom-com, they don't want a bitch. Makes a lot of sense if you think about it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this and you understand why to never send the dick pic and also why to develop your empathy in therapy or via, mainlining my podcasts or however is the best fit for you. And I'll talk to y'all soon. Have a great day, guys.